You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 533, our Life Day Treasury special. It's our winter holiday special. It's the last show of the year for us, to be honest. And tonight we're going to be covering one of the stories from a Life Day Treasury called Coruscant Solstice, which was written by Cavan Scott. And this is a show that Laura and I have been talking about doing for quite some time. I think we both fell in love with the story, as anyone would if you haven't had a chance to read it. It's just a great, great story and a perfect way to kind of end the year. And speaking of Lauren, she's with me here tonight. Lauren, welcome to the show. How are you doing? And happy solstice. This was like serendipitous. We didn't even plan this. It just kind of happened that we're doing this story on the first day of solstice. So
yeah, it's crazy, but I'm doing great. I'm feeling very festive. It made me super happy that we both wore our Star Wars Christmas sweaters. We didn't even talk about
we
it.
didn't plan it. No,
We didn't plan it.
So what's
Mine
yours?
Vader.
Oh, you got Vader too. Okay, I've got
Yeah.
a different Vader. So yeah.
Yeah, so two different Vaders. So it just made me so happy to see that you wore yours too. So I'm feeling super Christmassy right now.
What's funny is like when you go and see, I mean, there are some, don't get me wrong, I've seen a couple of them, but there aren't as many like Jedi light side Christmas sweaters. They're all like Stormtroopers and Vader, and I've seen a Darth Maul one. It's like there's something just, I don't know, more magical of the fact that you got Sith Lords on your sweatshirt or your sweater for, Christmas spirit than you do Jedi, which seems counterintuitive, but
Maybe it has to do with the color scheme because of the
probably
red.
it. The red,
Yeah.
Blue's not really synonymous with Christmas as much as green is or something. But yeah, so yeah, thanks everybody for joining us here. Again, this is the last episode of the year, but we're really not going to be gone that long. I think we're only going to take a week and a half off. And we'll be back with more
I think it's
episodes.
1 week.
It's like 1 week, yep. But yeah, before we get started, I want to say thank you to all of our Patreon members, all the supporters, everybody that's joined us for the live show, anyone that supported us throughout the entire year so far, in years past on the show, but specifically are now part of the tribe members: Rob, Mike Borda, Lauren, Dante, Riss Bayless, Justin Jackson, Sharkman Dan, Daz, Isabella, Uncle Leon, Josh C., Jacob, and Reader Reborn. And then also our Delusions of Grandeur tour, which is the highest tier. That's Rod, CJ, Alex, Steve, and Das. If you guys are interested in Patreon, you can head out to cantinacast.com/Patreon and sign up for as little as $2. And you got a wealth of backlog of episodes that span, I don't even know, 8-9 years now at this point. So tons and tons of content there for you guys. All right, before we get into the show, I want you to let us know what are you doing right now with Jedi Novel Archive, and then what do you got coming up beginning of the year?
Yes. So right now I'm reading Republic Commando. So I'm really excited to talk about that in January. It is a Legends book that I have had sitting on my coffee table for a year. I'm finally getting to it. It's super good so far. So I can't wait to actually dive into that one, talk about it some more. And then also January 3rd, the 4th issue of Shadows of Starlight is coming out. So I'm also going to cover all 4 of those issues on the channel as well. So it'll be kind of similar to how we talk about it on the main show, but in my videos, I'm usually just kind of hitting you with the main points and general thoughts. So it'll kind of be like an abbreviated version of what we've talked about with that comic.
And that's coming up. Yeah. But you said sometime after the 3rd, I would imagine, because we have on the 4th, I think is when we're expecting Shadows of Starlight, number 4. And so you and I are planning to cover both issues 3 and 4. We've already done 1 and 2. If you haven't had a chance to watch those, we kind of did them back to back. It was like about an hour and 40 minutes. It was supposed to be originally 2 shows, but go back and you can definitely required reading and watching as far as I'm concerned, especially if you're getting into Eye of Darkness. I was gonna say Shadows of Darkness. There's so many shadows and eyes and dark
Different levels of light.
But yeah, we'll be doing 3 and 4. Right now we're looking at probably January 4th. And then after that, we've been kind of pushing this off, but I think it's going to make sense, especially given we've already covered Shadows of Starlight by that point. But I think January 11th, so that Thursday, will be the first Eye of Darkness Part 1 episodes that we're going to do. So we've got 3 episodes lined up. and we'll do those one after another. So the 11th, the 18th, and the 25th, that'll conclude all our coverage for Eye of Darkness, and then we'll see where that goes from there. There might be opportunities to kind of dive in, do deeper dives into some of the themes and some of the other characters or relationships that we may not cover as extensively on the main show. So still lots and lots of High Republic coverage coming for the foreseeable future, honestly, because we don't really have any television to talk about, but there's so much stuff that that's coming out so far in phase 3 that we're both excited about talking, and we'll cover on both, between both shows. So
Thankfully, we've got more print stuff than we can cover, so
yeah,
it's good.
so
It's
far
really not a bad problem to have, I
yeah,
guess.
yeah. I mean, we haven't even touched the surface because like the High Republic comic just came out, right? We've got that first issue that Marvel sent it. By the way, thank you to Marvel. By the way, I haven't shared it with you, Lauren, but they sent us a greeting card, and it's like an animated one. It's got the X-Men on it, but it's from the publishing firm as a thank you for covering the stuff. And of course, they send us the advanced reader copies, and we're super grateful for all that. But it was very, very sweet that our rep sent us that card. So thank you
Oh, that's
to
super
Marvel,
nice.
yeah,
Yeah.
everybody for the holiday wishes. That's really cool. Let's see. So yeah, that'll wrap up pretty much all. And then at some point, we got to get the band back together, and we will do the holiday special breakdown. Now, I just got to ask you, did you watch any of that? Because we were getting real close before I got sick and had to reschedule. But did you watch any of it, or did you put it
No,
off?
I postponed my watch for closer to when we actually cover it, so
Okay,
that way
good.
the feelings are still fresh.
Yes. Okay, good. We won't say what feelings, but the feelings that
Yeah.
you have will go in fresh. Okay. So we've got that. At some point, I got to get Ed, Jonesy, and Lauren together. We'll figure out when we can reschedule that one, but that is still to come, and looking forward to that as well. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Okay, without further ado, let's get into our main topic, which is Life Day Treasury. And we're not going to, this is the book here. It came out back in 2021. I'm sure everybody fell in love with the cover when it came out. It had Stellan Gios on there. This is, well before obviously phase 3 and even some of the more, Fallen Star hadn't really come out yet, which I think we learned a lot about Stellan Gios in that book. But this was written by George Mann and Kevin Scott. The story that we're going to cover tonight is a Coruscant Solstice, and that is actually written by Kevin Scott himself. The illustrations are Grant Griffin. He does incredible work. We've already covered some of his art. We've used it for the Dark Legends stuff that we did, the myths and legends as well. The one thing that was interesting is they never did, same thing with like Tales of Darkness or I already forgot the title, but they didn't do like a separate book, right? With Myths and Fables, they had like 2 versions, and I think there was one version that was retail. There was another one that was exclusive to one of the book companies, and then there was one that you could only get at Galaxy's Edge, I think, as well. And I haven't gotten that one. I'm still trying to find a good price on it because it's pretty expensive. But
Oh, yeah.
this is the only cover they did, which I think is perfect. Honestly, you can see the
Yeah,
Wookiees there on the
it's
back.
pretty hard to beat that cover. Like the front image and the back image, I don't think you can really top those. So,
Right. In total, there's 8 stories, and they kind of span. It's not really all the High Republic, which is why you don't see the logo on here. Some of this story obviously is, but then there are some stories. A lot of them are kind of spattered around the time of, the New Hope, around that era, 0 BBY-ish, around there. And I think the latest one goes all the way like to 20 BBY, so not technically into the, the Resistance kind of era, but definitely past where we are with Mando and past where we are with like Return of the Jedi and some of the stuff that's happening there. So all in all, great book. Lots of great little short stories in here. I think this is probably the best story. No offense to anybody or anyone about the other stuff in here, but it's just such a good story. But what did you think? Have you had a chance to reading these other ones here? And what did you think about the book?
so I've kind of poked through some of the other ones, but yeah, this story really does stand out. And the thing too that's nice about it is even if you haven't read any of the High Republic, you don't have to be able to enjoy this story. I
Yeah.
mean, Stellan Gios is really just like your classic Jedi character, and that's really, I feel like, what you need to know about him. Even if you don't know his whole backstory and all that, this is still a super enjoyable read. And yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed it. I feel like it's like if Charles Dickens wrote Star Wars, which to me says it all. I love Dickens, so like if you think like a Christmas Carol sort of vibes with a little bit of Oliver Twist influence in there, I mean, that really
Yeah.
covers it.
Yeah. You could tell that's where I think Kevin Scott was coming from. It definitely is coming from a Dickens and kind of place, especially with the story here. Before we get into the actual story too, the very beginning has this kind of, it's talking about how there's, Life Day as a concept, right? Life Day started by the Wookiees. We all know the story behind that and how it came to be with the holiday special. But then it goes into kind of talking about how, that started getting universally galactically adopted by a number of other species and inhabitants and planets and stuff. Eventually that kind of started spreading, and that kind of became synonymous with this time of the year. However, there are other festivals, the celebrations of solstice that are happening, like the one that we're going to talk about here, which is specific to Coruscant. But there were some interesting ones in there about how New Alderaan has something called Festival of Winter's Heart. Endor has a celebration they call White Fall. The Hutts have one called the Festival of 1,000 Suns, which sounds hot and dry and just miserable. I don't know why they're celebrating that one.
Not really very wintry.
It's not very wintry at all, but it's the Hutts. I mean, they're just, what do you get? So their Mon Cala has something called the Turning of Year's Tide. And just from that very beginning, like, I think something about the book that I really enjoyed is there's a lot of world building in here that happens. And I don't mean world building like on the galactic level, but just kind of filling in the space of what life is like during the holiday season in Star Wars. And I would say this too, like, if you're offended by like bricks and screws, this is probably the story for you, because there's so many things that are so like picked and derived from our own, culture and how we celebrate, like, Christianity and most, I wouldn't say most, but a lot of cultures celebrate Christmas with the Christmas trees and gifts and, chestnut roastings and stuff like that. All that traditional stuff is in here, but he's kind of, Scott's kind of done a little twist to it and given us something that makes it feel just a little bit different, but it is very similar. But I think I love that. I mean, I love the fact that it is grounded in that way, because it's not, this is one of those stories where if it gets too far and too alien, then maybe the story doesn't resonate with you. I don't know.
It's like the Star Wars version of stuff that feels familiar, like even down to the roasted chestnuts. Like, but I mean, I don't mind, because it really sets the scene for the type of story that's being told here.
Yeah. Yeah. The and one of the other interesting things too, right before we're out of the intro, was they kind of define Life Day. I think he does a really good job of defining what Life Day is. I mean, I think we all have our own kind of personal views, and we see how it's celebrated, within the stories themselves, and even in our own real life, which I just did last week. I actually did the walk. I need to send you the video. We actually took the balls and like did the. Oh, have you seen them when they walk with the balls?
I mean, I'm familiar with the practice, I guess you could say.
Right. The ceremony.
That makes it sound much more formal.
The sacrifice.
Yeah.
Whatever, the ritual, whatever that is. But we actually did that in real life at a party last week. I'll have to send you the video. But anyways,
oh my gosh, that's
the
awesome.
point is, Scott does a good job of kind of defining what Life Day really is. And I just want to read this real quick. It says, no matter where you were from or what you look like, you could share in the hope that tomorrow would be better, and that if you loved and cared for others, whatever your differences, you would ensure that darkness never extinguished the light. So it's very, very Star Warsy. It's, light conquering good. I think it hits home with what George Lucas has always said about, light and dark, good and evil, that kind of thing. So, not something that I would expect the Empire to necessarily celebrate, but I can see where, most cultures would probably try to adhere to this, and in the spirit of this, certainly resonates with a lot of cultures. Okay. Let's get into this story then. So this actually opens up on Coruscant. And what I really loved about this is, at first you get a sense of Stellan Gios. He's on Coruscant. He's on the upper levels, right? He's kind of just taking in all the sights and sounds. I think it says that he hadn't really been there since he was a Padawan. That'd been the last time that he was on Coruscant during this the Coruscant Solstice.
Feels very Christmassy.
I'm going to say it over and over again. I know I'm going to mess it up. But it was, he was supposed to be at the council, right? Because at the council, they were doing a big, grand hoopla kind of thing.
Fancy Christmas party with a big dinner.
Right.
And the chancellor's there.
Yep. And Life Day sweaters. Everybody's wearing those.
Everybody's got their Darth Vader sweater on.
Right. But he knows he should be there, right? He's supposed to be there. I mean, like, Lena So is there. Other dignitaries are there from all over the galaxy. Yoda was going to show up, which is a big deal. Like, okay, yeah, he'll show up to the Christmas party, but when the Jedi need him most, he's out.
He's on his travels. I did laugh at that part when there's like a little mention that even Yoda was expected to come from his travels and make it to the party. I was like, oh my gosh, Yoda and his travels.
as much grief as we've given him already about that.
I know.
But yeah, and he's there, he's kind of, again, so he's out there, he's just walking through the streets, and he's a Jedi, so of course he stands out. But there was also, the trees, I think, what would they call them? The Vicari trees, which I assume are just kind of like pine trees, like these really massive Christmas trees that they've put up throughout all of Coruscant.
With the
There's
Christmas lights.
the Christmas lights, or I think they were called
Hmm.
glow globes, is what they called them, right? So those are like the
Yeah.
fairy lights kind of thing. There's music playing, so they're piping music on Coruscant's upper levels. So anywhere you go, you're hearing, I don't know, Christmas music or solstice music, Life Day music going on, whatever it is. And then there's kids, running around. They've got presents. I mean, he did a really good job of kind of painting this atmosphere of what this time of the year is like for people on Coruscant, and it's just beautiful with all the lights and everything else. And so it's such a stark contrast to what we're going to see a little bit later in the book, which is really what I love. It's just how he kind of sets all that up.
Yeah, this part of the book, or the story, I guess, was very immersive just with the little details that he captures. Like, even though, when you're reading it, you can tell that it's meant to be like a Star Wars version of things that we're familiar with. I feel like that really worked for me because I felt like I was there, and I felt like, wow, this sounds like just a delightful little festive market situation. So, I mean, I really appreciated the atmosphere that was built in the first part of this.
Yeah. And what's funny too is they don't really he doesn't dwell on this very much, but the idea that Coruscant at some point even had a solstice, right? You think about it. He mentions it in there like it almost feels like it's a tall tale, like it's a legend. Like why would a planet like Coruscant celebrate solstice when their environments are all manufactured, right? They have artificial environments. Solstice would imply that at some point people were tending to crops and fields and doing this stuff, and we know for thousands and thousands and thousands of years this has truly been, and I already forget the name, but the planet's all one big city kind of thing. So whether that's true or not, whether they just adopted it because of the spirit, or maybe at some point, maybe millions of years ago, at some point they celebrated solstice whenever there were, or natural seasons, and there was still land that needed to be fertilized and tend to and cropped and that sort of thing. But it's kind of a cool concept that it makes you wonder, like, why would they celebrate this given where they are and how long they've been living like this for so long. It is interesting. I'd like to know the backstory on that, if that really is something that happened.
Yeah, and even if it's something that, was so far in the distant past that they don't know exactly how it would have been celebrated or what exactly went into it, the fact that it's based on sort of like a local legend, to me, that still makes a lot of sense for a holiday to come from a story like that.
Yeah, yeah. And he's walking through the streets and again looking at everything, and eventually he comes up to a carousel, which it feels like a merry-go-round or some sort, right? Of course, it's running on repulsor lifts of some sort because it's Star Wars and it has to. And he's kind of taking that in, and then suddenly, he wishes he's thinking about it and thinking, like, I really wish I could, like, he wants to ride the rides, but thinks better of it and says, that would look kind of weird. Like, it's weird enough that you have a Jedi in his fancy golden garbs, walking through Coruscant at this time of the year. But then on top of that, if he were actually to get into a carousel, that would probably be, going too far, maybe out of character for what he should be doing at this time, especially when he's supposed to be somewhere else at this point.
Why
Um,
do you think it's weird though that, because this is something that when I read this, I was like, I don't know. To me, I would expect that if I'm on Coruscant and I know that the Jedi Temple is nearby, I don't think I would be super surprised to see a Jedi out on a walk. Is it because of the fact that it's like a solstice celebration going on, and so people expect the Jedi to be off doing other things?
yeah, that's how I interpret it. Not so much that it would be rare to see a Jedi in these parts, but just given the time of the year and knowing what, their traditions, right? If their traditions are such that dignitaries, senators from all over the galaxy come at this time to celebrate at the Jedi Temple with the Jedi, and it's enough to bring Yoda back, like, this is probably a rare thing that they would see a Jedi, uh, usually they'd be behind closed doors at this time. But to see
Mm.
them walking around, that's how I interpret. Not so much that, hey, Jedi, I'm sure the Jedi are at least on the upper levels, are seen from time to time, right? I would imagine. But that's kind of how I interpreted it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The and so he's talking about he's waiting for the snow to fall any minute now, like this pre-manufactured snow. And then he suddenly has kind of like this sense, right? There's a disturbance in the force, if you will. He senses there's something not right. So immediately checks the carousel, thinking, okay, maybe something's going on with the carousel. Everybody's there. He's looking around. Everybody seems happy, but there's something that's bothering him. And it's about that time that he notices this little Gotal boy. And if anybody doesn't know, the Gotals are the goat-looking people that I always make fun of and love. I love them to death, but there's in the Bad Batch for some reason. Sorry, I'm gonna get off on a tangent. But in the Bad Batch for some reason, the Gotals are like super present. Like they're like hidden. They're gems for me. But yeah, there's this like little Gotal boy, and he sees that little Gotal boy reach into somebody's pocket and steal a coin purse. And it's at that point, he realizes, okay, something's going on here. This is what I felt. He's going around stealing stuff, and sure enough, he walks over to another lady and steals a bracelet right off of her wrist, or and at that moment the boy turns and sees they like Stellan and him make eye contact, and Stellan's like, okay, and the boy freaks out like, holy crap,
He's like, whoops.
I've been busted here at this point. And then so from here, this is where Stellan decides, okay, he jumps up into the trees, like into these tall Vicari trees, and this kid takes off, like he books it, he starts running, he's thinking, okay, I've got a thief on my hand here. And when he gets up there, the pine needles are coming down. The other people see this Jedi now, or we already talked about how weird it was. There was a Jedi around this time. Now he's in a tree, making pine needles fall down.
Yeah.
And
making a commotion.
Making a commotion, realizing that something's going on. And then Stellan notices that it wasn't just two people that had stuff that was stolen, but other people started realizing, oh my gosh, I'm missing my chrono, or I'm missing, whatever it is. It didn't really say, but this kid's been going around stealing a lot of stuff in this short period of time.
Pretty much everybody in this whole plaza, square, market, whatever, has been a victim of this child stealing something from them. And also the fact that this kid could outrun Stellan, who is like a very well-trained, very accomplished Jedi. I was like, wow, he must have really been booking it, or very creative with his evasive maneuvers, like for him to be able to outrun him.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to like Ezra in Star Wars Rebels, or if you want to go outside of Star Wars but not outside of Disney, it's kind of like Aladdin. If you remember the Aladdin cartoon when he's being caught, it's the fact that that's his environment, right? That's where he knows, and that's where he's grown up. He's survived on the streets. He lives on these streets, and so that gives him, I think, an advantage to kind of duck and weave in and out of people in the tight spaces. And I don't think even with and Stellan, we're going to spoil it, of course, but he stays with him. But yeah, this kid is elusive, but I think it's for that reason only, not for anything else. It's just, this is his home turf, if you will. And so it's pretty easy for him to kind of, navigate through all of that.
That's a good point. He probably knows what works in terms of getting away from people, because it's probably not the first time he's gotten caught either.
No, yeah, it's a good point, because he does even say later on that he's outrun police officers before, and I think I forget what the other thing was, but yeah, he's outrun them before. But even the kid is thinking like, wow, this is a Jedi. This is a whole new level. Like, I've never had to try to outrun a Jedi, because Stellan does stay with him. It's just he loses him, but more on that here.
Yeah.
In just a second. So at this point, Stellan is kind of leaping from tree to tree and trying to stay up high to kind of get a good view of where this kid's going as he's chasing him. And he's sensing a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety coming from the kid. He's chasing him through an alleyway, and at some point they kind of lock eyes on each other. He kind of doesn't necessarily corner him, but they're within viewing distance. And Stellan tells him through the Force, stay where you are. All is calm. All is still, which I thought reminded me a lot from Silent Night.
Yeah.
All is calm. I don't know if that was intentional or not. But he's trying to use the Force to kind of persuade the kid to stop, and not run off. And it's about that time that he gets interrupted. But before we go into the hulking Besselix, is there anything you wanted to add to this little chase that's going on here?
Yeah, I was gonna say that once Stellan starts sensing the fear coming from the kid and just kind of like the sense of panic, that's kind of like our first clue that this kid does not want to be a thief. He's not, which, I mean, obviously you see a child that's a thief. Your first thought is probably like, there's something not right here. This kid is probably not doing this by choice. But then, like, when Stellan's sensing those types of emotions, this isn't just a game for this kid. This is like a really scary situation that he's put himself in. So you get the sense that there's probably a reason that he had to do this.
Yeah. And I think for Stellan though, what's and that as a reader, like I think you and I and anyone that reads this, I think picks up on that. But if we know one thing about Stellan is he's probably not as I don't want to give him a shortcoming here, but he's probably not as in tune to some of that stuff, right? Because of who he is.
Right.
He's living as a Jedi, one of the highest level people in terms of like you know no, I wasn't gonna say like class, I guess, if you want to call it that, right? But he lives in this temple with these golden robes. He can a lot of Jedi can be out of touch with real reality and certainly what's going on Coruscant on the upper levels and the deeper levels. We saw examples of that in the Ahsoka series or the Clone Wars series last season with the Marquez sisters. But for him, it's kind of black and white, right? He sees somebody stealing things and his immediate thought is, okay, well, it is a kid. However, this kid's probably just doing bad stuff because he's doing bad stuff. The
Yeah.
beauty of this story lies in that Stellan realizes that he was wrong and what he does to right that wrong later on, which I think is actually is super beautiful.
Well, and Stellan doesn't seem like, it's not a malicious assumption that he's making about the kid. He seems to he makes an incorrect assumption that this kid is just messing around and not thinking about how he's hurting other people with his actions, which, I mean, it's understandable how Stellan could think that just based on, the very little information that he has.
Yeah, exactly. The and so he's right. They've made eye contact. He's told this kid to calm down, to not run away. And then right when you think he's about to, approach the child and, get him to turn over all the stuff that he stole, he runs into a basilisk, which is, the forearm guy, what's his name? Not
Dex.
Dex, yeah, from the diner, right? He runs into one of these guys, and this guy is super inebriated, right? He says, "Happy Solstice," and he's talking to Stellan Gios and sees that it's a Jedi, talks about how, wow, this is a lucky day for me, a lucky night that I ran into a Jedi. And this guy's completely drunk. And while this is happening, the kid, is leaving. And he's telling Stellan to, hey, let's go be merry. Let's have a drink together. And Stellan responds back, I don't need Jedi to make me merry, he repeated, shuffling back towards the dubious delights of drinking establishment. And then Stellan uses the Force to tell him to go back to where he was, enjoy his festivities. And of course he does. He abides. So he uses the Force to send that basilisk away, and then after he takes off, Stellan says, "Just don't enjoy too much, right?
Yeah,
He's
not
already
too much.
he's already had enough.
I'm gonna
to
go
drink."
home and rethink my life,
Yeah,
as Obi-Wan would say.
yeah. It was a cute little moment there, but it was enough of a distraction for the kid to get away, and you kind of think that's you think where is this going to go at this point? It then goes into we cut over to the kid himself, right? And now the kid is now in the lower levels, and it doesn't really say how far down he goes, but it feels like it is pretty far down there, right? It's a very different atmosphere than what we got at the very beginning of the book. There's not much solstice cheer, if at all, anywhere. It's bitterly cold. There's very little lights here. There's no music playing. There's no smell of chestnuts, or any of that stuff. In fact, it says there's only engine oil and despair, which is like just the gloomiest
Yeah.
thing you can possibly think of. But yeah, this is where this kid lives. Like he lives in these parts. And so when Stellan's down there, he starts using the Force to kind of focus in and trying to feel that fear from the kid so he can hone in and hopefully catch up with wherever he's gone. And eventually he does. He locks into him. And when he gets there, he realizes that he's been surrounded by a gang of older kids, right? And this gang is called the Narukus gang, I think is the how you pronounce that. But there's a Lepi there, a Nephran, and an Octoroid, which are all kind of weird looking Star Wars creatures. We're not going to get into what they look like, but but these other
Look
kids
it
are
up.
these kids are surrounding him, and this kid, the kid that Stellan was chasing, is kind of fearful, right? He's a little scared that he's been cornered by this gang. And they're, about to really just kind of, I think they've taken some stuff from him. I think it's the crab-like creature picks him up and is shaking stuff out of him, right? They're basically stealing everything that he just stole. And at first when I
Yeah.
read this, I thought it was, okay, well, maybe this is who we reported to. And you couldn't realize it's not at all. This is just it's just a gang that, he probably ran into their territory. And so now he's got to pay a price. And so they're just taking everything from him at this point.
I had the same thought at first too, that I was like, "Oh, maybe this is like his boss or something." And
Yeah.
then once I kept reading, I kind of got the idea that they probably knew that he was good at stealing, and so maybe they would wait for him to come back with stuff and then try to take it cuz, this obviously isn't the first time that they've encountered him before.
Yeah, right. They're very familiar with who he is. In fact, they know him by his first name, which is Nit. His full name is Nitel Karkson, which we'll learn here in a little bit. But they tell him, hey, Nit, tell us what you got for us. And this is where they take all his stuff. Well, Stellan sees this and immediately, as any good Jedi would, ignites his lightsaber and, does a couple flips or whatever, lands right in front of them. And I think two of the thugs, I'm going to call them gang members, run off immediately when they see the Jedi. They want nothing to do with them. But the Octoid, who's like really huge, doesn't. Decides to open fire. So he, fires off a volley of blaster bolts at Stellan. Stellan flips over the bolts, lands, he's got two blasters out, cuts both of the ends of the blasters off, within a matter of seconds. And that Octoid just, leaves, right? He ends up running off. Stellan
That'll
doesn't do
do
anything.
it.
Yeah, I mean, it's over before it even begins, quite
Yeah.
honestly. Um, but then, once he tells him to go, he tells that Octoid to run off, and that kid leaves. And so it's now Nit and Stellan. And, from Nit's perspective, not only is he intimidated and scared, fearful that the Jedi is going to turn him in, he's also kind of weirded out by this. He's, confused that the Jedi would jump in and basically, save his life. Like, why would he do that knowing that he was a thief and that he had just caught him stealing some things as well?
Also, probably like, how did you even get down here? Because going from level to level on Coruscant, it's not like just like a simple thing.
Right.
Like, I mean, I know we've seen it in canon a couple times. You have to like take multiple elevators. You have to walk in this scary place. Like, it's kind
Yeah.
of a process to get down there. So he's probably surprised that he even followed him down there at all.
Yeah. I mean, even within each level, it's like a maze, right? It's a maze within a maze to get to, point A to point B. So yeah, I mean, this says a lot about Stellan Gios and just Jedi in general, that you really can't outrun these guys, even on Coruscant, even in your own kind of neighborhood. So Nit at that point asks him, "Are you going to arrest me?" And Stellan says, "Will you do this again?" The boy shook his head, then said no. And then Stellan says, "Then go on your way, young Nit, and stay out of trouble." And so Nit takes off, and then Stellan turns and he takes off. And again, this is now the second time where you think, okay, story's over. Like, where are we going to go? But this is where I guess my favorite parts come in. Nit
Mhm.
then goes back to his home, and I'm using that in air quotes because it's, the home that he lives in, thin walls, thin doors. The furniture is completely battered, right? He lives in abject poverty for the most part. I mean, if you want to call it a house, you can call it a house, but it's very clear that this kid lives just very humbly, if that's even a thing.
Well, and
And
he's a child and he's caring for his grandmother. And it
yeah,
sounds like he's her only caretaker too, which adds a whole nother level to it.
right. Yeah, he walks in and his grandmother's there. She's sick. She's elderly. I think she's boiling some like soup of some sort on a stove right next to her, but otherwise she's pretty much bedridden. And she's freezing, like she's absolutely cold. And he walks in and he's starting to think, she asks him like, how'd your day go or whatever. And he's thinking, well, I can't tell her, that I went and stole some stuff. And then I was, confronted by a gang, and then I was saved by a Jedi who was after me for stealing things. And so, of course he's living this life, and, he was doing this. I don't want to spoil that part of it just yet, but, he's not really happy with what he's been doing, but there's definitely, like you said earlier, there's a reason why this is happening, and why he's doing the things that he does. But it's clear that he was doing it for his grandmother. He was doing it for the conditions that they're living in and not having much, that his only way to kind of survive was to go up to the upper levels and steal for them, the people that were more privileged, like, the examples that he did in the very beginning of the book,
Hmm.
of the story. And so it's at that point, they're sitting there, and then he hears a creaky board right outside the front door, which means that someone's, shown up at their doorstep. And the first thing that comes to mind is like, oh my gosh, it's the gang again, right? This is retaliation for what happened. They're coming to get me, kind of thing. And when he opens a door, it's Stellan Gios that is standing there at the doorway. And this is where, and I just want to read this. I know I've got a lot in here to read, but this is where this part of the story, this third act, if you will, the story it's just so good. It's so well written. So I hope I'll do it justice. But this is Nit. Nit says, "You said you'd let me go," Nit cried, but the Jedi didn't respond, looking past Nit to his grandmother hacking painfully on her poor excuse for a mattress. "So that's why you stole those things. Not for yourself, but for her." That's what Stellan says to him. There was something in his voice and his expression, something that Nit had never experienced before. It wasn't pity or disgust, but compassion, a deep sense of empathy, despite the fact their lives couldn't be any more different. The Jedi up in his spired temple, Nit and his grandmother living in the dirt down here. But all the compassion in the world wouldn't stop Nit from flinching as the Jedi suddenly unclasped his great cloak with its elaborate golden embroidery. As Nit watched in wonder, the bearded man whirled the cloak around to lay it tenderly on Nit's grandmother. "There, that will keep you warm." The elderly Gotal smiled toothlessly at the Jedi, pulled the robe close. The man returned the smile, squeezing her arm gently before rising and turning to leave. So, like, that's just the sweetest thing ever. Like, and we didn't really talk about it at one point. He's talking about how cold it is at this time and how he's well protected because he has on these really extravagant, robes and clothing, but they're made of really fine material. And so he's not affected by the cold as much as half the other people there on the upper levels and the lower levels. And, she's laying there with nothing. And it's, the giving of Stellan Gios, right? His heart is so huge that he realizes that, one, this kid has been stealing because he was going to buy something, probably a blanket for his grandmother because she was so cold. And so what he does, he does what I think was unexpected in giving him this really fancy, or giving her that really fancy cloak to wear and to stay warm that night. So it's just a beautiful gesture from Stellan Gios. And this is the stuff that makes you love him more, but it makes the hurt more too happen with knowing that he, the way he died and during the Fallen Star. But your thoughts, I guess, on this little scene?
Yeah, well, and Stellan doesn't even think twice about it. Once he understands what's actually going on here, once he sees it, he's like, "Oh, of course I need to give her my cloak." It's not like he had a thought about, "Well, how am I going to get back to the temple without my cloak?" or anything like that. He just gives it to her without hesitation.
Yeah.
And something I love about this story too, like in addition to just how well written it is, and especially the way that it ends, is if you're a fan of the High Republic, when we see Stellan Gios in the High Republic novels, he's very like poster child. He's got this big role in the council, this
Yeah.
big sense of duty. He's like in the public eye very much. And so getting to see him actually in like a private moment with these people where there's nobody watching,
Yep.
there's not like nobody cares about like, is he being a good Jedi, blah, blah, blah. Like that's not relevant to him at this moment. He just finds himself in this situation and just does the right thing. And that's where I feel like you can really see that deep down, he really has what it takes to be the best Jedi that you can be. Cause I feel like that's a big theme of the High Republic too, is like what makes you a good Jedi is stuff like this that we see in this story.
Yeah.
So yeah, it does make the hurt a lot worse, especially because just of the way that happened. I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't read it yet, but yeah.
Oh, Fallen Star?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just another example of Stellan doing, I mean, he is selfless, which is what you would expect from Jedi. But yeah, I mean, this is a small example compared to what he does in Fallen Star. But yeah, I mean, there's just another example of his selflessness, which is pretty special. So after he places the cloak on his grandmother, I'll just read the rest of this piece here. He says, he paused at the door, looking back at Nit. "Thank you." This is Stellan talking to Nit. Nit frowned. "For what?" "For reminding me, especially at this time of the year, why I do what I do." Nit didn't know what to say. "You're welcome, I guess. Just promise me one thing." "What?" "That you'll be true to your word. No more stealing." Nit nodded, feeling heat on his cheeks. "No more stealing, I promise." And so, again, this is now the fourth time where you think, okay, this is the end of the story, and this is where Stellan turns and he's about to head out. I mean, he's already made his way outside the door. It was going to be the last gesture, when Nit suddenly yells at him and tells him, "Hey, come back," and says that he wants Stellan to stay with him and his grandmother because she's making something called Strat stew, which sounds like, I don't know, it sounds terrible if you ask me, but it's all they have.
Or maybe she's super good at making it. Who knows?
She probably is very good at making it. But I guarantee you, they don't serve this at the Jedi Temple, right? And
Hmm.
Stellan knows this, right? He knows that this is not something he probably would normally eat. But of course, he has, he very without hesitation says,
Yeah.
you know what, that's a great idea. I would rather be here than anywhere else right now, right? Again, thinking that, knowing that he has this grand feast that's happening at the Jedi Temple that he could go to, he's making the decision to stay here with these people in this moment and have strat stew as opposed to the other stuff, which again, another great example of just his selflessness and his kindness.
Well, and even though earlier in the story, like he was reflecting on how excited he was about just the beauty of the season and, like the decorations and things like that on the upper level. And he seemed excited about the feast and all of that. But once he's actually presented with this other option, again, no hesitation, just is very quick to know that all of that festive stuff that's fun to look at and experience, it's not really the true meaning of the holiday.
Yeah.
And he would rather, you know, spend it with people where he's helping them and they're also kind of helping him in a way, like he says.
Yeah. Yeah. This is very much the Charles Dickens of it all, right? This little scene that's happening here, and the experiences that are coming here next. And this is where it kind of the part of the story that really just I think I was really fun and I loved it a lot. But so Stellan comes in and he's been invited to eat dinner with them, and Nick's like very honest. He's like, we don't have any chairs, right? You're gonna have to sit on the floor. They just don't have furniture. And Stellan's like, decides to use the force. So he kind of goes into this, I was going to say swaza, but it's not, but like a meditative, like sit down. What do they call it? Crisscross applesauce, whatever
Yeah,
that is.
I was just about to say.
Crisscross applesauce, and starts levitating with the force while he's sitting down. So he's not sitting on the floor. And Nit's like really, he's completely enthralled by this what the Jedi is doing. And so he asks Nit, do you want to give it a try? And Nit's, of course, 8 years old, thinking, heck yeah, I want to try this. And so he does the same thing. And Stellan levitates him as well. So they're both kind of just sitting there floating. He's keeping them up while they're having their little dinner. And it's a very cute moment. And then Nit he introduces himself fully. He says, I'm Nitel Carkson. And then Stellan says, I'm Stellan. He said, let's have your stew. And then you and your grandmother can come back with me to the temple. There are fresh clothes and comfortable beds, enough to give you both a good night's sleep. Then tomorrow, maybe we can discuss over a bowl of spiced egg milk how we can put your talents to better use. What do you say? Nit grinned from ear to ear. It was going to be a very good solstice. So then this is the most intriguing piece of this is this moment, because we don't hear back. Like, I don't know what Stellan was wanting to do when said, put your talents to use.
Yeah.
It feels, knowing that, especially with Cavan Scott, there probably is a story, maybe forthcoming still. Maybe it's a cameo. It could be in a comic. You never know where this is going to pop up. But this is part of that world building that I talked about, not only with just the environment stuff, but then just introducing to this really cool character named Natel and kind of teasing us this idea that Stellan has something more in mind for him, that he's going to use him at some point for something else. I
Do
wouldn't.
you have any theories on what that could be?
No, I mean his talents lie now. Let me back up. So you could almost interpret this in one of two ways, like the extreme, and I get so much criticism for this, and I promise I'm just joking this time. But the extreme is maybe Stellan senses that he's force sensitive. Okay,
So, okay, I was gonna ask that too
did you?
because
Okay,
he stole from like all the people outside.
well, it's like Ezra all over again, right? I mean, Ezra was really
Right.
good at it, and yeah, I mean, some of it is talent, some of it's raw talent, but other of it is some of the force. Even if they don't consciously know they're using it, some of that could be how he's become so good at this, right? And so maybe there's something there that Stellan just kind of is picking up on, and so he wants to take him to the temple so that maybe he can do some testing and just see what he's, if there's anything there. Or it could just be, hey, this kid's got a talent for stealing, or maybe navigating through, Coruscant, those levels. I don't know. There could be a couple different things. I mean, we know that people at the temple, not everybody at the temple is force sensitive, right? So
Hmm.
they could
Yeah,
have
there's lots of jobs in the
exactly.
temple.
Right. And this could be an opportunity for him to think like, this kid's got a lot of potential. He can do things. He's very talented in some ways. So maybe we just get him a job there, and he's going to, put his neck out for him and get him a job there, and get his mom and him out of these lower levels, and, kind of help turn his life around. But I would love for there to be something more than that, right? That he pops up, maybe not at this age. Of course, we're well past this in phase 3 now. So he could be, 12, 13 years old. Maybe he's a Padawan. Maybe he's just another kid that shows up. And, we've got non-force sensitive users running around in the High Republic with Jedi and working alongside Jedi. There's some great examples of that. So I think there's an opportunity here. I just don't know how much how much Scott will actually pay off on this, and if it amounts to nothing. There's something to be said about it ending like this and us never really knowing, right? Just knowing that the deeds were enough and that Stellan did all this for them without really having to know the rest of the story. But I don't know. I could go both ways. But there is something here. There's definitely, he's laying down something. I just don't know when it'll ever manifest.
Yeah, I'm glad that we at least end the story with knowing that Stellan is at least serious about trying to help them come up with some other long-term solution. Because I will admit, I was kind of sad about like, give them the blanket and go. I was like, come on, like the blanket's like helpful, but like obviously they've got other issues other than just the blanket. So I was glad that there's also like a situation where he's trying to help them with getting some sort of better living conditions, hopefully.
Yeah.
So even though we don't know exactly what that is, like I'm still happy that we at least know that these people, it sounds like, are going to have a better life going forward.
Yeah. Let's see. One Up versus CPU says, are they talking about the insider story? I'm not completely caught up on my insider stories. I have all the insider magazines, but they're all digital. And then I went and bought the High Republic collection that came out as well. And I realized I missed more than I thought I'd missed. So I did go look to see if this character had come up so far, at least on Wikipedia. And because I was thinking, well, maybe he has popped up in something. And so far, at least as of yesterday on Wikipedia, this is the only time that Knit is referenced in any literature so far. So if they did sneak him in, I mean, they could have snuck him in and didn't give him a name, right? And that could have been just kind of a little Easter egg that made you think, oh, I wonder if that's him. But yeah, so far I don't know of any stories so far that have come out with him in it. But that would be a good way to do it too, right? Without introducing him formally into the High Republic, or I guess Phase 3 through novels and anything like that. The Insider is a great way to do that too. We've seen that before too. There's plenty of characters from the High Republic that are in the Insider magazines that have never been mentioned in any of the books, right? And yet they have their own storylines and they're doing their own things and they are impacting the galaxy in just different ways. So yeah, I like that idea if they brought them out there. What about you? What would you like to see?
I mean, I would like to see him again just because I would like to know what becomes of him. Especially with the whole putting your talents to better use thing. That was just kind of intriguing to me because I'm like, what could that look like? Because the Jedi aren't really stealing from anybody. I feel like that's not really very ethical.
Yeah.
So
I mean, well, they're still kids, but beyond that, yeah, you're right.
that yeah.
I'm kidding.
Don't open that can of worms. Not on Christmas.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, maybe like I could see maybe using him as some sort of like a person to work with trying to understand the Coruscant underworld a little bit more because this kid obviously does know his way around it.
Yeah, yeah.
So maybe he could be some sort of a contact in that kind of a way. I mean, hopefully if they have him have a job in the Jedi Temple, hopefully it's a pretty easy job. I mean, give this kid a break, you know.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say because it's kind of like what exactly could stealing talents be good for? But so
Mm,
that's why I'm kind of leaning more in the maybe like an insider for what's going on in the lower levels of Coruscant.
yeah.
Because there's probably a lot of work down there that the Jedi could do. And it sounds like they just haven't really been fully aware of it because of how surprised Stellan is by the conditions down there.
Yeah, that's true. And I don't think it's going to get any better. I mean, it probably gets worse, right? I don't think they make a difference. By the time we get to the prequel trilogy, the Jedi pretty much stay away from there, right? We see very clear examples of denizens living down here that have said, the Jedi just do what they want. They bring death and destruction. They don't care about us, right? So it doesn't sound like anything got
Yeah.
better from it, but you're right. There's a lot of opportunity here for the Jedi if they really want to kind of make a difference on their
Yeah.
home turf.
Just something to get him on the payroll.
Yeah, exactly. It's stop eating Strat stew.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, I mean, it's again one of 8 stories. It's probably the best story in here. It's a great way to start the book. All of these stories are very heartwarming, but I really loved it. I mean, I love Stellan Gios, but this is one of those stories that really makes you love him even more. And he does so many great things throughout all of phase 1 and in the novels, even the mangas. There's all kinds of examples of where Stellan Gios is kind of that Polestar, right? He is the light of the Jedi in a lot of ways. That Firebrand they're just amazing characters. And yet you get yet another dimension from Stellan Gios, and it just adds to the complexity. It adds to the weight of his loss, knowing that this was something that happened. And I'm sure other Jedi had other examples as well, but just knowing how tragically he died and the manner in which he died and what he died for, and knowing that this story is out there is just, it's a punch to the heart, but it's also very heartwarming as well at the same time. So I can't say enough about Stellan Gios. He's just one of my favorite characters now.
Well, and this story also adds to his credibility too, of him being the poster boy and so high up on the council that we see in the High Republic. I mean, in a story like this, you can tell that, especially, I mean, I know we see examples of it in the High Republic too, but for me, this kind of just struck a chord with me of he's really got it where it counts, even when nobody else is watching. And to me, that's a huge piece of this is he ends up getting glory later on in his life,
Yeah.
but he doesn't need it. And he's just happy. He's truly happy just with being the best that he can be and like trying to help other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Well said. It's a great story. Go pick it up. Again, book's still out there. You can find it pretty much everywhere at this point, but either digital or in physical copies. You owe it to yourself to pick this up because there's some other good stories in here that are very heartwarming as well. So, all right. Well, we'll end the show there. I want to say thank you again to everybody that came out to the live show, and everybody that was here tonight. So, Sky, 80s kid from the 90s, Danny K, Skywalker's Academy, Noah Rogers, Anakin Crespin, and One Up versus CPU. Thank you guys so much for joining the live feed tonight. If you guys are interested in this, head out to cantinacast.com/YouTube and sign up there, subscribe. Hit the like button. That way you guys know whenever we do shows. We try to be communicate when these are going to happen, but should you miss it, that's the best way to catch it. And don't forget we're going to take a break for about a week and a half ish or so, and then we'll come back to Shadows of Starlight number 3 and 4. Go watch and listen to episodes 1 and 2 that we did. And then after that, we will start our breakdown of Eye of Darkness, which is going to be 3 episodes, and we're going to break it up based on characters. So we'll do everybody that's behind the wall, everybody that's outside of the wall.
Yeah.
And then we'll kind of focus on Marchion Ro and all the baddies and stuff. It's going to be a lot of fun, much more in depth than you would expect. If you've never watched or been part of these shows before, they go a little bit long, but we really get into the weeds on a lot of this stuff. So it's a really fun discussion, especially if you're a bookworm and you like talking about this stuff with fellow bookworms. You guys won't be disappointed. I promise you. In fact, I'm going to actually do visuals too. We haven't done visuals in a while. I did them all through Light of the Jedi, and I did them in, what was it? Rising Storm, but we didn't do one really for Fallen Star, but I think I'm going to go back and do one for this book. So we've just got so much content now that's out there. So it'd be really cool to kind of have a visual to kind of go with some of this stuff. So if I can't find it, I'll do what I did with those and I'll just make it up. So you'll have to excuse me for that, but it should be a lot of fun.
Sounds awesome. I'm so excited to talk about that.
Yeah, it's a great book. Hey, before we go, I want to say thank you. Do you have the Christmas gift I got you?
Yes.
With you?
Do you want me to?
I'm gonna get yours.
Are we
and show
doing
yours.
show and tell?
Show and tell, real quick, just real quick.
Okay, well, I'll go first while you're getting mine. So for Christmas, Albert sent me this amazing Goldsboro edition of Eye of Darkness with the gold sprayed edges. So, and it's signed. I couldn't believe it.
I'm like, what number did you get? And she's like, it's signed. I'm like, yeah, it's signed.
Well, yeah. So basically what I did was when I opened it, I was like flipping through it, looking at it, admiring the quality of the book and all of that. But I didn't realize it's this inner page that's signed. I'm trying to hold it up to the camera and I'm not doing it.
Yeah, you can see it.
So at first it was like, I just flipped right on past it. But yeah, it's very cool that it's signed. So thank you so much. This was like totally unexpected and very special because I've always looked at these online and like never actually gotten my hands on one. So
yeah, no, you're welcome. You're very welcome. Those are cool books. I've loved all of them. They do a really good job with those. And Lauren surprised me because number one, I didn't even know what this was.
Yeah, that's
Two,
why I wrote it in the card what
yeah,
it
so she
was.
made these like book sleeve. Are they called book sleeves? Is that the official term?
Book sleeves,
Yeah.
yeah.
So she sewed these together, which is, or like sewed them, and it's not even just like the stuff on the outside. On the inside, she's got like a pattern
Yeah,
as
like
well that's
a
different.
lining, yeah.
Yeah, so those are awesome. So
So
you
it's
put,
nice and padded, so if you're putting your book in your backpack, then it protects it.
and
Look at that, fits perfectly.
and it's so funny. This is my original Heir to the Empire. I mean, look how rough this is. This is my original Heir to the Empire book that I had bought back in '92, I think, when it first came out. But it's seen better days. But I'm hesitant to put this on the shelf because I'm always worried something's going to happen, especially with cats. But now it fits in this little book holder.
Perfect.
And yeah, it can go on my my bookshelf.
Wow,
up
and
there.
it just goes in there so perfectly. It's like it was meant to be.
I know, it's like the perfect size. So
wow,
thank you for doing that.
Didn't have to shove it in there or anything.
Some of them I was
tried
like,
to
all
get
right, that
Eye
one
of
don't fit.
Darkness in one of mine, and I was like, okay, this book's a little too fat for this book sleeve.
Yep. So thank you for the Christmas gift. I do appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. I'm so happy to be a part of the show. So thank you for everything over the past year. I can't believe it's been a year since I've joined.
Yeah, no, it is. I was thinking about that the other day. So thanks for being. Well, you were already, part of the show. You weren't part
Well,
of the
yeah.
show, but you were supporting the show before that.
Yeah, since I've like gone on the show,
Yes.
I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thanks everybody again. You guys enjoy the rest of the year, and look forward to all the coverage coming into 2024. So we'll see you guys here next year.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.